Welcome to the third module and the first section in the third module, which is place marketing. First question you're probably having is there a chapter I'm supposed to read? Hopefully you realize that's not the case. There's no chapter to read and no reading quiz for this. Any material in this chapter will actually be assessed. You'll be questioned about it in the exam. And so that's where most of this will come from. So I want to get first into place marketing. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, but first thing I want to do is basically define it. It's one of the P's in the marketing mix, so let's define it. It's place is essentially the activities that are associated with transferring goods from the producer to the final buyer, and in some respects then into the user. And so typically when we think about place marketing, it's distribution. Place marketing includes the distribution of goods from the producer to the consumer. In the traditional hard goods, meaning you would produce a hat, how does it get to the customer, the physical item? But also in the sport industry, and why this is unique is it also includes sport facilities. So sports are unique because it's produced and consumed at the same time. If we talk about the sporting event, in the same respect, a fitness facility is the same thing. If somebody's training for a marathon, while you are training and while you are working out and while you're at the game, it's produced and consumed at the same time. And so place marketing in that circumstance is the facility in which you're doing it in. It's how it is transferring the good, or in this circumstance, a service to you, the consumer. It's also unique because sport is perishable. As soon as the event has occurred, it's over. You can't buy a ticket to yesterday's game. Once the marathon is over, it's 2 to 5 hours, and once the workout's over, it's over. And so place marketing is the one big tangible thing that you can say as a consumer, I was satisfied or I wasn't. And so place marketing is important. This first one, this is what we're going to talk about throughout the videos in this chapter. This first video will talk about the first 2 bullet points, which is more of the apparel and manufacturing, equipment manufacturing, and then we'll talk about sponsorship. So let's start with the sport apparel and equipment manufacturing. This is more of what we think of the traditional distribution, in that we think about the channels in which the product is produced or the service is produced and gets to the user. And they do this in a lot of ways. First of all, we try to, as marketers, to ensure there are as few contacts with that product as possible. In other words, we don't want to have too many middlemen. And what I mean by middlemen is I don't want it to change hands, because every time it changes hands or is transferred from one person to another, there's an opportunity for that distribution channel to be broken, or there's something to go wrong. And so if I can get the manufactured good to the consumer's hand, to the end user's hands as quickly as possible, as efficiently and as effectively, the more likely the consumer is going to be satisfied. I also want to try to adjust for discrepancies in the market, assortments, and services via sorting of items. So try to make it as easy as possible. I also want to make as a marketer, as many of these exchanges and these transactions as standard as possible. We know in sports sometimes that's not always easy, but what we're trying to do is say if one person checks out from our online retail store or comes into our brick and mortar academy, sports and outgoods actual store, everybody's experience should be similar, and that should be of high quality. And then we also want to try to make sure that it's easy for them to search for both the buyers, and if we are in a resale market, the sellers as well. It gives our, if we're a retailer, our manufacturers the ability to help provide the items to the customers in a fast and efficient way. And so when we talk about the goods side of the sports apparel and equipment manufacturing, place marketing and distribution is a big deal. We also want to look at how this market typically looks. If we look at the market channels, we have a lot of different players. The manufacturer would be obviously the one that produces. The wholesaler is typically the one where it brings in the different manufacturers' goods and places it for sale to larger groups. Those would be jobbers, those people who would be the middlemen between the wholesaler and the retailer. And the retailer, of course, is what the consumer goes to actually buy the product. So in our traditional channel for hard goods, the things that are produced like a jersey or a cleat or something like that, we would have the manufacturer create it. It would then be sent to the wholesaler. The wholesaler then works with the jobber to ensure that the good actually gets to the retailer, and then the retailer then sells it to the customer. As I just mentioned, in place marketing, we want to ensure as few transactions occur between the manufacturer and the consumer. And so sometimes you don't see this every person in this traditional chain actually be used. Many times, if you have the ability for distribution as a manufacturer, you may skip the middle three and go, I'm the manufacturer. If they order direct from me, I can get it to the consumer with less middlemen, and the costs go down, and obviously the efficiency and effectiveness, if you have the capability of doing so. You take, for example, professional sport team. The manufacturer is the team itself, the players that are on the field. There's nobody there that's, the only other example would be a televised sporting event, which we'll see in a second. But really, the consumer is directly interacting with the manufacturer at the game, but also at the same time, the manufacturer is providing that service directly to the consumer. In a televised sporting event, the same thing occurs. However, we have the event going through some sort of media, so broadcasting either through satellite technology or cable provider at your home or in a restaurant or bar or something like that, or the media is also could be broadband media, so live streaming of the games online. So that's kind of our traditional channels of distribution. Another big part, and we won't talk a ton about it in this class. If you're more interested in sport promotion, we spend a great deal of time on sports sponsorship. But I do want to hit on this idea of sponsorship. We know that in today's society that we are becoming ever elusive as consumers, meaning there's so many messages that are sent to us. Our different firms are trying to find ways to get our attention. The old ways of advertising the product are starting to be deserted, in that if I just put an ad in a newspaper and expect people to come to me, or if I put up a website online and expect people to come by from me and that's all I do, then that's the old ways of advertising where I'm assuming they're going to come to me. However, it's becoming more and more difficult for companies to get in front of clients. And so one way is to try to connect with them emotionally. We've talked about this throughout the semester. But one thing that sports does for our consumers is provides a social identity, that they can be a part of something bigger and better than themselves, or something they want to be a part of that's great. And so with what I'm saying is, sponsors or these different firms are trying to find ways to get into sports so that they can meet with their target markets and ensure that they're getting their attention. One of the ways, again, is through sport. So this is data from 2013. This is the last data that I could find. I'm sure something's going to come out tomorrow, but the whole point is this gives us a good idea of the growth of sponsorship just in the 2000 eras. In 2009, there were 16.5, I believe this is billion, sorry, in billion dollars in sponsorship spending just in North America. You can see that's had an annual growth of anywhere from basically 4 to 5.5%. And now in 2013 and today, I think the last thing I saw was in the $20 billion range for North American sponsorship spending. If you look globally, that number is even greater. In 2013, the $53.3 billion in sponsorship spending. We see some of these trends have come in a variety of ways. So just because we're saying sponsorship doesn't mean it's just in sport. We do have competition in where firms are spending their advertising dollar. And sport is the biggest one. Sport spending in 2012 of the 20 billion, or in that circumstance was 19, came from sports. And entertainment was 1.93 billion, for different causes 1.7, arts close to a billion. Same thing for festivals, fairs, and associations. This is another way of looking at the thing I just told you. Essentially 69% or almost 70% of all sponsorship spending in North America goes towards sports. The rest of it, you could see, goes to other elements. And you see a lot of overlap. You may have a sporting event that is also a cause, so a 5K event. Or you might see a concert that also includes sporting events, so that's the entertainment side. So that's typically where sponsorship spending occurs. Similar in global sponsorship, we see that different regions are pulling in more sponsorship dollars than others. Europe is a big part of that. Asia Pacific is the next second player. Central and South America is 3.7, and then the rest of the world is 2.1. That was in 2011. You can see those numbers have gone up since. So why is sponsorship becoming so popular? One of the reasons is the decreased efficiency of traditional media. People would put in commercials on television, and in these commercials we started to see different service providers, satellite, cable technology, that would put in DVR, or people started to get TiVo, or the similar type of recorded television shows. You can ask, well, why do most people do that? Part of the reason is so they can skip through commercials and so they can rewatch something. And so the way that the value of the traditional commercial is starting to be abandoned, in that people are starting to skip. But a lot of people argue that sports is DVR proof. Very few people actually want to watch a sporting event after it has occurred, because you already know the outcome, or could find out the outcome. You know, some people would record big games they couldn't make it to, and so they would watch it again. But for the most part, DVR is not used for sporting events unless you're rewatching it at a later time. Very few people will watch a game afterwards and just skip through the commercials. So we can argue that the reason why sponsorship has become increased in popularity is that people watch sport through DVR. Other concerns, not through DVR, other concerns would be society's concerns for cause-related marketing. And as I said a minute ago, sometimes sporting events and causes come hand in hand. We talk about breast cancer awareness, for example. Most sport organizations have a pink out night or breast cancer awareness night. And so firms want to be attached to cause-related marketing events and be in front of sport consumers. Excuse me. Also, consumers are more accepting, especially in the United States, with the commercialization of sport. We also know, and we'll talk about in a second, this idea of goodwill. Firms are trying to increase the goodwill in the minds of consumers. And like I just said, we're increasing the acceptance of commercialization, and sport programming interest has also increased. So these are all reasons why sports sponsorship has become more popular. So I want to give you this idea of goodwill, and this model essentially tells us why or what sports sponsors are trying to do and who they're trying to get in front of. This idea of, you can see on the very far left in the middle, you have this idea of awareness. These are all things that the marketer's trying to do. If your goal of a sports sponsorship is to increase awareness for your products, then you want to be in that category. However, many sports sponsors are trying to get to the very far right, and that is an actual purchase. And so how do they do that? Well, we see at the very top, there's the intensity of contingent goodwill. In other words, intensity of goodwill toward the sponsor because they are a sponsor. At the very bottom, you also have a continuum that is fan involvement. So the more somebody's involved, the further right they go, the less they're involved, the further left they go. And so essentially what we're looking at, I'll give you the example of Southwest Airlines and the Texas Rangers. So let's just say you're a Texas Ranger fan that rarely go to a game. You know, you may go to one game a year, or you watch on television once or twice. You would say that your fan involvement is relatively low, but you do go to a game. And when you go to a game and you see Southwest had simply put an outfield sign, had not done really anything else, we see that in that circumstance there may be some sort of awareness. So you go to the game, hey, I remember seeing that sign, I'm aware that Southwest is a sponsor. While that may lead to other things, such as making you think about Southwest Airlines when you decide on your next flight, essentially if Southwest Airlines was simply wanting to raise awareness, then the job was done. However, many of them are trying to move their way up the goodwill contingency framework, essentially move their way up that continuum so that they can move the consumer towards an actual purchase. Well, if we're still that person who goes to a game once or twice a year, watches it on television maybe once or twice, we're still not highly involved, but we do see that Southwest is involved in commercials. They have an outfield sign. They sponsor the Dizzy Bat Race during the game. They also have scholarship funds that go to underprivileged youth. You get the point. They're doing all of these things that try to show goodwill towards being a sponsor. In this circumstance, a person sitting in the stand that has a low amount of fan involvement might go, well, that's really cool. I value those things. The image is there. I appreciate it, but it doesn't get me to an actual purchase. So who is Southwest Airlines really trying to get in front of? those highly involved fans, those season ticket holders, those people who go to away games, those people that go and don't leave the team when they're not doing so hot. They're less sensitive to price when the team increases or decreases price. The point is, these are our highly involved fans, the ones that go to the games, that are diehard, that watch them on television all the time. Well, those fans will notice the contingent goodwill, the goodwill that Southwest is trying to show towards the Texas Rangers by doing all of those things. In that circumstance, we know that highly involved fans, when there's a high level of goodwill, will lead to an actual purchase most of the time. Well, what happens when you are that highly involved fan, yet Southwest Airlines simply puts an outfield wall? There you go. Thanks for your money. I'm glad that you're a sponsor, but it's really not going to do much for me. And so in order for sponsors, and if you want to take sport promotion sometime, we'll talk more about this idea of sponsorship and what this all means, how to develop this goodwill. But what's really unique is that sport fans want to see a sponsor that goes above and beyond for them. And otherwise, they're going to go, all right, thanks for being a sponsor and supporting that team. It's not going to do a whole lot for me. And so we'll talk about this idea of activation in sports sponsorship. But activation is what the sponsor goes above and beyond to try and activate or put into action their sponsorship.